Hi, I'm Stefan, and today we're going to talk about the US tax history. Perhaps it might not seem so, but today's tax system is much simpler and way easier than it was 50 or 100 years ago. Let's have a look. Let's start from the beginning, from the colonial days, where there was no income tax and no federal government, at least in America. Colonies back then were taxed in different ways. For example, there was the head tax, which meant that every man on the field had to pay a fixed sum regularly. This tax policy lasted for many, many centuries. In 1765, the British colonies in America were taxed by the Stamp Duty Act. All documents were taxed. It caused an uproar, but not as much as the taxation of tea. That caused a huge uproar, and the Boston Tea Party turned into a Revolutionary War. Tax rates skyrocketed in 1916, when the First World War began. The United States needed money desperately to fund the war. Tax rates rose by 1%, and the maximum rate was at 15%. Also, exceeding revenues from the tax system exceeded $1.5 million for the first time in US history. The first income tax was introduced during the Civil War, where the government needed to fund the war. It meant that every person who made more than $10,000 a year paid a tax rate of 5%, to the earlier 2%. Although the threshold also changed, every person who made more than $600 a year were taxed. And it was the first time where employers were accused of not telling their employees what they were being taxed by. The income tax was nevertheless discontinued 10 years later. The federal government returned to taxing tobacco and alcohol, and that policy lasted for another 45 years. Also, fun fact, only 1% of America's entire population at that time paid taxes. After the war, the country's economy flourished. Everything seemed fine, everyone was happy, and tax rates returned to a normal rate, to 1 to 25%. But as always, not everything good lasts forever. And therefore, in 1929, the Great Depression began, with the stock market collapsing. Tax rates rose to 63% in 1932, and in 1936, it reached a staggering height of 79%. Also, during the Depression, the government collected the first Social Security tax, but it didn't really have any effect on the Depression itself, only 3 years later after the Depression was over. Then World War II came, where 3 new tax laws were adopted, which rose tax rates and cancelled privileges on Americans. As a result, those who earned more than $200,000 a year had to give up everything to the government. And also, the highest tax reached 94%. During the Second World War, the number of Americans paying taxes increased by 35 million. This is the end of the journey. Instead of being sad and disappointed about the tax system we have today, rejoice, because it could be a lot worse. We'll see you again in the near future. Take care.